Hey y'all, thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a very special guest for you. She served as the minority leader of the Georgia House of Representatives. Just last year became the first African-American woman to give the rebuttal to the State of the Union address. And she's the founder of Fair Fight 2020, which builds voter protection teams in states across the country. Leader Stacey Abrams, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Thank you, and please call me Stacey.
Okay, I will. Thank you. So one of the first times, actually the first time I saw you in person was during the Black Women Own the Conversation segment that was filming for OWN Network, and it was incredible. It was an incredible discussion. And one of the things you said stuck with me. It said that it took you a while to gain confidence, but that you are confident in who you are. And you said this. You said, "I ran for governor as a sturdy woman with natural hair and a gap in my teeth." And you said that your confidence and capacity was important to you in your gubernatorial race. So for you, what is confidence and how do you achieve it?
Well, I like to think about confidence. The textbook definition is a belief that you can do something. But part of what we have to realize is that some people are born with it. They wake up, they think I can do anything, and congratulations to them. Most of us, we have to learn confidence. We have to learn that we can do things. Sometimes we learn to do it because we failed at it so many times that we figured out all the things not to do. And so now we're confident we can get it done. For others, it's that we've had challenges, and each hurdle we've overcome has built our resilience and our sense of capacity. And then sometimes we know we may not know it the moment we start, but we have the capacity to learn it. And what I want people not to do is to think that confidence only has one iteration, one version. Confidence is believing that even if you can't now, you can eventually, and that you have the capacity to get there. So everything I try, typically in politics, someone hasn't done before if they look like me. But my confidence is that if I don't already know how to do it, I can figure it out because I've figured out other things. I'm willing to admit what I don't know. I'm willing to ask for help. And that my confidence is strong enough that I can acknowledge what I don't have and what I don't know. It doesn't diminish who I am because I'm not an expert in everything. I'm confident because I know I can if I work at it.
Exactly. And was there ever a moment that you felt like, okay, I finally reached this spot, I finally feel confident, and I feel like I can go forward and feel fully formed? Because I know that there are times that I still don't feel that way even today.
I don't think anyone, well, I think most people never get there. But the folks who feel that all the time, usually they're a little wrong. Mm-hmm. So I prefer to have these moments of doubt because doubt keeps you sharp. Doubt makes you think a second time about this thing you think you know, but it also it sparks creativity. It gives us different ways to tackle our problems or to challenge our obstacles because I don't always think I'm right. I don't always think I know it. And I don't always feel fully formed. I'm 46 and there are still things that happen where I have to pause and think, okay, can I meet this moment? Can I do this thing? Am I enough? But confidence is enough to say that even if I don't know the answer, I'm willing to try anyway. Because confidence doesn't mean you're absolutely right. Confidence means you're willing to do it and to try.
Exactly. For people who ask about building confidence, can you tell me about a time when you felt that doubt and what you did to overcome that doubt and feel confident about something afterwards?
Well, because I know your viewers range in age, I'm going to give you two quick examples.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was on the debate team. I did it mainly because I didn't want to, the other option was even less interesting to me. But one of the things I knew was that when I got on the debate team, first year students didn't get to debate, which is fine with me because I was happy to do research. I didn't actually want to participate. Well, the person who was the lead debater got sick and we had a tournament the next day. And so the coach said, you're going to debate. I'm like, I'm going to do what?
That you were going to debate for the first
I was going to debate. And I'm like, I don't know how. I've never done this. I got so nervous. I created a psychosomatic version of laryngitis.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't talk. I couldn't talk. And it was all in my head. There was nothing physically wrong with me. But I was so nervous. I went home and my mom came into my room and she said, okay, Stacey, like, why are you so nervous? And I was like, I can't talk. I don't. And she's like, Stacey, you didn't have laryngitis this morning. You don't have it now. And she said, what you're worried about, she's like, what are you the most worried about? I said, I'm worried about embarrassing myself. And she said, okay, so what happens if you embarrass yourself? She's like, are they going to kick you out of school? Are you going to be kicked off the team? Like, yes, those all seem like reasonable possibilities. And she said, I don't think that's what's going to happen. She said, the worst thing that can happen is that you'll be embarrassed for a few minutes. But the best thing that can happen is that you actually are good at this. And how are you going to know if you don't try? It didn't work immediately, but she did make me go to school the next day and she made me get on the bus to go to the tournament. But by the time we got there, I gave myself enough of a pep talk that I was like, okay, they're not expecting me to be great. They're not even expecting me to be good. So as long as I don't fall, that's my threshold.
Don't fall and say words. That's
exactly. And not at the same time. But it was enough. And while I didn't win the tournament, I actually got through to like the second or third round, which I didn't expect. And I became a really good debater. And the second time was when I was running for governor. One of the things you have to do when you run for office is you have to call people and ask them for all of their money. And you have to call
to that.
Exactly.
Like everybody does.
Exactly. And so, and you know this, when you're trying to win something, you need people to like you, to say they like you. Well, I called people that I'd known for years, who had invested in me when I ran for the state legislature, who supported me when I became the leader. And these people, especially women that I'd known, said, well, I think you're smart. I think you're really capable, but you're a Black woman. Mm. Like they were telling me a secret. Like, I know. But what they said was they didn't think a Black woman could do it. And so they weren't going to support me, not because they didn't think I was the best person, but because they just didn't think I was the right person. And that hurt. It hurt to have people who support you and know you deny you. And my confidence took a hit. But what I did was try to remember, why did I want to run in the first place? And I remembered for every one of those people who said no, there was someone who said yes. And instead of listening to all the people saying no, I decided to listen to the people who said yes. I didn't ignore what the people who said no were saying. It just made me better at answering their concerns. But I didn't let those no people stop me, because so often we let the negative outweigh and overwhelm the positive. And part of confidence is giving the positive just as much credibility, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, and I think that's a prime example of you and your leadership, and not only being able to overcome challenge and have confidence on the back end, but also demonstrate what a powerful and profound leader you are. And I think that's something that our community is interested in hearing about, because obviously a lot of people who are watching this are members of the pageant community and compete. Some of them are in the political space, but not always. How important are non-political leaders in society today?
They are the most important. One of the reasons I wanted to join you today is that your voice matters, because so often politics feels like an isolating thing. It's something people think happens to them, not for them, and certainly not about them. One of the most important pieces to me is having folks who aren't trying to win an election talk about why voting matters. People who don't necessarily know about what piece of legislation is pending talk about the issues that really matter. And that's why this is so important. We need people who experience real life to talk about what it means. Because here's what politics is. Politics is just how we organize ourselves to solve problems. We like to put trappings on it and give people titles and spend a lot of money and say nasty things. But fundamentally, in a democratic society, we choose how we solve our problems by who we pick to lead us. And all politics is who do we pick and what do they do? And it's non-politicians who make up the bulk of the people who do the picking. Mm-hmm. And so if those folks don't choose to participate, or if their parents don't participate and their siblings don't participate, then the people who do show up get to decide what happens. Mm-hmm. And the people who are the most harmed by bad decisions, the people who suffer the most from inattention and from meanness, when we don't participate in the process, especially as the people who vote and who hold people accountable, then the wrong people get to make the decisions and all of us have to pay.
Exactly. Well, and I think it's important that you said that you said if you feel like you don't have a say in what's going on and don't participate, then other people do get a say. And I think there are many women who compete in pageants who hold titles for their communities or their states or their countries, sometimes don't feel like we have as much influence as political leaders. Do you think that women who compete in pageants and represent society are influential?
Absolutely. Number one, you command not just an audience, but a following. And let's be clear about what that means. It means you've proven yourself in community. You've demonstrated to others that you will show up and be present. You've demonstrated skills and capacity and intellect. And in those spaces, there are people who listen to you who will never show up for a city council meeting, who will never pay attention to a state legislator. Because you have this audience, you have the ability to then translate that audience into an activist. Because activism isn't just about a specific movement, it's about moving people, about moving issues. And one of the things that pageants require, they ask you, what do you want to fix? What issue do you want to solve? Mm-hmm. Your ability to create that solution is important, because what I want people to always understand is that the first role in politics or in being just an advocate is educating someone else. Because the thing that wakes you up in the morning is not the thing that wakes up the other person. So your first opportunity is just to use your platform to make sure people know what you're concerned about. Mm-hmm. That's an extraordinary thing. The second is to tell them what to do about it. So educate first and then advocate. Tell them what you need them to do. And if it's you need them to pass a bill or invest money, whatever that is, give them the steps on what to do. And don't assume that because someone got elected to office, they know what to do. So number one, they don't necessarily know what you care about. And number two, they don't necessarily know what to do about it. So educate them first and then advocate second. And if they don't do their jobs, if they don't listen, if they don't respond, your third opportunity is to agitate. And folks in pageants, you guys are amazing at getting people to pay attention to things they didn't think they were going to pay attention to. You've got armies of women and men who want to help you get your thing done. Use that army to agitate, to say, if you don't do what we need you to do, we're going to hire someone who can. That's all that voting is. It's firing people who don't do their jobs and hiring new people to do it instead. So educate, advocate, and agitate.
I love it. I love those three steps. That is amazing. Well, I feel like that you have done such a great job of mobilizing people, especially during your election. Clearly, that's something that the pageant community should do when we're convincing people of our importance and showing people like we are influential and we want to do things for good. So in your recent gubernatorial election, you mobilized unprecedented levels of voter turnout, especially in minority communities. How important is that in the upcoming presidential election?
It's the difference between winning and losing. So let's be clear. There are always going to be people who think that there is a silver bullet to how you win an election, that if you get left-handed people who cross the street sideways, that's your ticket to victory. No, you win by getting as many people as possible who share your vision to lift their voices. That's it. And if their voices are loud enough, they win. I think about the pageants where, and I don't know if they still do it today, but where they would allow people to call in and rank the reason people call into those shows, the reason people call into pageants, call into The Voice, we believe our voices matter, except when it actually changes our lives in a very fundamental way with voting. And I want people to feel the exact same way. We can change things if we speak up, if we show up. And for people of color, for minority communities, for those who are marginalized and disadvantaged, they expect us to stay home. They expect us not to speak. We were so successful in 2018, I did not become governor, but I really irritate people when I say we won, because what we did, we wanted to show that people of color, that the marginalized and the disadvantaged could work in coalition with white voters and change the game. And we did it. We tripled the number of Latinos who voted. We tripled the number of Asian Pacific Islanders who voted. We increased youth participation by 139%. We also increased Black voting by 40%. When you say triple and 139, 40 doesn't sound that exciting, but hear this. Cheslie, in 2014, 1.1 million Democrats voted for governor, 1.1 million in total. In 2018, 1.2 million Black people voted for me.
Wow.
That happened because I saw them. I spoke with them, but more importantly, I listened to them. And when you listen to people and you hear what they need, which is what you do, what your sisters in the pageant world do, when you listen to people and you internalize their hopes and their dreams, and then you speak it aloud for them, that's how they turn out. And if people of color, if minorities vote in this election, the last election wasn't won by millions of votes. It was lost on my side of the aisle. It was lost by 77,000 people across 3 states. There are more than enough people in every one of those states and around this country for us to pick the next set of leaders and for our voices to be valued because they know we'll show up.
Exactly. Well, and I think one of the reasons people end up not showing up sometimes is sometimes they feel daunted or scared about the election process, about how to register. And you've been fighting to educate people about the possibility of mail-in votes. How important is that, especially considering the ongoing pandemic, that people know about mail-in voting?
Absolutely. So let's start with what voter suppression is. It's real. That's the first thing. For so long, people thought, well, I'm just not smart enough, or I didn't do it right, or I made a mistake, or it's just too complicated. It's not too complicated in your mind. They've made it too complicated. There are people who've intentionally made it harder to vote. And we're seeing that play out right now. We know that mail-in voting is the safest, most accessible way to vote. Because here's the way to think about it. If on election day you have 100 people standing in line all packed together, COVID-19 is going to have a field day. Mm-hmm. What you want is to get as many people out of line so that everybody who has to be in line can spread out. And the best way to get people out of line is not for them not to vote, it's for them to mail in their vote, so they vote from home. But we have 50 states and the territory, or the District of Columbia. Every place has access to vote by mail. Everyone can mail in a ballot. The issue is how many obstacles are put in place. If you live in Georgia, all you have to do is request the ballot, and if it gets to you, you can vote by mail. If you are next door in Alabama, you have to have an excuse, and they don't consider COVID-19 a valid excuse.
I did not know that.
If you live in Texas, you have to be 65 years old or have a disability. So in 3 states that are just in this region, you have 3 different sets of laws. That's why we need federal action called the HEROES Act to say that no matter where you live in America, for the first time, we all have to operate by the same rules. Everyone who is eligible to vote gets a ballot. They can send the ballot in without having to pay for postage, because a lot of us can't go to the post office right now. They don't have to meet silly laws like there's a law in Wisconsin that says you have to have someone witness your ballot. Well, if you live at home by yourself,
maybe kind of difficult.
Exactly.
Voter ID laws end up doing the same thing.
Exactly. And so if we can get as many people, if we get the HEROES Act passed, so one of the things everyone listening can do right now is call your senator and tell them to pass the HEROES Act. If they pass the HEROES Act, every American who is eligible to vote will have the resources needed. And if we do that, then the people who don't have the ability to vote from home, people who are homeless, people who've been displaced by COVID-19, people who have disabilities, those who have language barriers, or people who try to vote by mail but don't get it done, they're the only ones who have to be in line. But instead of there being 100 people in line, if we can get it down to 50 or 25, then that means that everyone can spread out, vote safely, and every voice can be heard.
Exactly. It makes sense, especially considering how dangerous it is for people not to practice social distancing nowadays. Now, besides advocating for mail-in voting, you've also been talking a lot about making sure that each person gets a fair count in the census. Why is this important, especially for young people like our audience to understand and to actually participate in?
So right now, a lot of communities are worried about whether kids going back to school will be able to go back to school. And if they go back to school, the question is, are going to be crowded in classrooms where they can't possibly socially distance? We also know a lot of young people are going to face the issue of, do they have school lunches when they get back? If you're college age, will you have a Pell Grant that can pay for you to stay in school for another semester? All of those dollars are decided by the census. Whether there is a hospital in your community, whether your grandmother can get into a nursing home, or if someone in your family has COVID-19, whether they can go to a hospital, that's decided by the census. The census not only counts how many people are here, it tells us what they need. That's the way to think about it. And it's absolutely safe. There are a lot of people who try to trick you, but if you have a cell phone or a power bill, they know how to find you. So all you're doing is telling them not who you are, but what you need. And that's why young people in particular need to fill out the census or encourage their families to do so, because people of color are the least likely to be counted by the census. Migrants, immigrants are the least likely to be counted. People who live in rural communities, young people under the age of 5, and those who are transitional. So those are communities that desperately need to be counted, because all of the resources to help lift them up, to support their communities, it comes from the census. The other piece is that it's politics. The lines that get drawn to decide who gets to run for office, it gets decided by who gets counted. And if they don't count people, especially people of color, then the way the lines are drawn, our communities don't get included. And we don't have the opportunity to vote for people who will necessarily represent our interest. Doing the census doesn't guarantee you get what you need, but without doing the census, I guarantee you won't get it. Exactly. The way to think about it is that the census is like getting a stimulus check every year. And imagine if you didn't get your stimulus check every year for 10 years, they forgot to send you your check. That's what happens if you don't fill out the census.
Exactly. Well, and I think that there's so many people who don't understand the implications of not filling out the census. So I'm glad that you've given that information here today, and glad that you continue to advocate for it. Now, there was something that you said that resonated with me and that I want to talk about a little bit more. You talked about how many firsts you've had, the weight of being first. I mean, you've hit tons of milestones. First Black woman to be a major party representative for governor in the state. First Black woman to deliver the rebuttal for the State of the Union address. How do you maintain your confidence in the face of the challenge of being first?
Part of being first is remembering that the mission isn't to be first, it's to not be the last. And I always see any opportunity I get as a responsibility, not simply to do it for me, but to make sure other people know that they can do it too. Particularly when you're a woman or a person of color, and when you're a Black woman, the number of things that we'll be first at, the list is still too long. But my responsibility is not to, congratulate myself for being first. It's to wonder why it took us so long. And I know why. And so my job is, once I get in there, to have the confidence to talk about what the obstacles were, and then to break them apart, and to tear down those barriers, take the door off the hinges, prop it on its side, and let everybody come in. Because I don't want to be in there by myself. I mean, you understand this. When you're first, people think that's something to celebrate. And it is, because it shows that it can be done. But when you're the only, what it shows is that you're an anomaly, that you're a token, as opposed to that you're the first of many. I want to be the first of many. And my confidence comes from the fact that I know that we are capable of so much more. I know that there are young women like you who are doing extraordinary things, and that if I do what I do, I get knitted together with what you accomplish and what young people who we have never met before are going to do. And we build this amazing new tapestry of our successes. It's so dense and so beautiful that no one can pick out what came first.
Exactly. Well, and I love your approach about wanting there to be more of us. I love the saying, like, we lift as we climb, and it seems like that's exactly the advocacy that you do, is trying to bring people with you. And I think one of the things that frustrates me is that there are so many firsts that haven't happened yet. We still haven't had a Black female governor, still haven't had a Black female Supreme Court justice, still haven't had a Black female nominee of a major party in a presidential election. What do you think the lack of these firsts says about how the United States views Black female leadership?
Yeah, I've gotten a little bit of blowback, because when I'm asked a question, I learned early on, you answer, because you don't want anyone else to speak for you, because you don't know what they're going to say. And that sometimes if I want to be noticed, I have to raise my hand. Sometimes I got to wave. But also that people are going to deny or diminish or question what I'm capable of unless I can show it. And so I tend to be very straightforward about what I'm doing. But the corollary to that is that sometimes it's off-putting and it's disconcerting to people. When I hear questions about the VP thing and people point to the jobs that you have to be qualified. In America, there have only ever been 2 Black women senators. There have only ever been 15 Black women ever elected statewide in the history of the United States. And so under that rubric, there have only been 15 Black women ever qualified. I can't let that stand, because that tells every other young woman that your ability to be great, to be successful, to serve your community is limited by what people did before you. Mm-hmm. As America, we have to broaden what we see as possible. And we have to understand that our capacity to change the face of leadership depends on our willingness to step up and say we are willing to fight for it. Not to fight for a certain job or certain title, but to fight to be included in the conversation. Because if we don't put ourselves in that conversation, we can't wait for others to do it for us.
Exactly. Well, and I think that leaders like you have demonstrated to other people that Black women are capable of the leadership positions that you've held, and that other Black women have not held yet, that we should be measured based on our accomplishments and not, based on what people see outside. So thank you for your leadership and for showing us that. Sorry, go ahead. Were you about to say something? I don't know.
I was about to say you're awesome. Thank you for the question. And you're an example of that as well. I mean, this has been an extraordinary year where we are changing what people see. And I think there's an assumption that if you call it out, you presume you're entitled. I don't assume entitlement to anything. I'm not entitled to have any job. What I am responsible for is doing my best work to position my capacity to do the service that I see. And I think you're a perfect example of not assuming you're entitled, but you're not going to let someone overlook you or see past you. You're going to make them see you so you can get it done.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so we have to talk about some recent events in our communities that have been impactful, that have outraged people across the nation. One of those incidents involved a woman named Amy Cooper in an incident in Central Park here in New York City. Another incident involved the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What are your thoughts on how close these events were in time to each other, and whether or not the proximity of those events in time helped people to see the effects that using or weaponizing 911 can have on Black people?
So I would link together 4 things. You've got Amy Cooper and her attack on Christian Cooper, threatening his life for simply asking her to follow the law. You've got Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered in the streets by 2 men, possibly 3, who thought that they had seen someone like him, or at least that's the lie they tell, and use that as justification for killing him in the streets. You've got Breonna Taylor, who was asleep in her bed, and the police used a no-knock warrant to come in and kill her. And you've got George Floyd, who was forced to the pavement and murdered by a police officer. Our sense of what justice means in America has to look at all 4 of those incidents and understand that whether it is a citizen who thinks that she has the authority to threaten and weaponize a 911 call, a vigilante and his son who believe that they can take a human life simply because they don't like what they think he is, a woman who who is actually serving people as an EMT, who can be deprived of her life and her liberty because of the mistakes made by the police, and George Floyd, who we saw an intentional act of violence against him. We have to believe in the humanity of all of these people, of Christian Cooper, of Ahmaud Arbery, of Breonna Taylor, and of George Floyd. We have to have the right to protest and be angry and to demand better action. But we also have the right to elect leaders who see us and believe in our humanity. No one wants to live in a society where we don't have law enforcement. No one wants to have law enforcement be afraid to do their jobs. But accountability is the corollary of authority. And if you have authority, whether it's the ability to call 911 or the ability to arrest someone for a bad action, that authority has to be met with accountability. And in Ahmaud Arbery's case, There was no accountability from law enforcement until there was national attention. And so to your fundamental question, these things happen together in time, but the reality is they happen all the time. And until we fix our systems of justice so that justice applies to and is available to everyone, where we maintain our sense of authority, but also add levels of real accountability, then we aren't going to be the just nation I know we can be.
Exactly. Well, and I think you tweeted something about 3 of those incidents. You tweeted about Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and about George Floyd, and you said that we as citizens have to make sure, let me see if I can find it here. Yes, that we have an obligation to demand reform.
Yes.
What, in your opinion, is the most effective way to demand reform? And we talked a little bit about protests that have happened. What do you think is most effective? What can we do?
Voting, and that's why voting is so important. There are those who think I care about just the act of voting. Voting is an act, but it is the only way in a democratic society we get to hire the people who set the policies. It's how we hire and elect district attorneys, like the ones who refuse to prosecute the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. It's how we elect sheriffs who are in charge of whether or not police officers use no-knock warrants. I'm not sure that's what happened to Breonna, but I do know it happens across the country. It's how we elect mayors who hold their police officers and their police chiefs accountable. It's how we make these decisions. Voting is the single most powerful act of any citizen. It is how we lift our voices. We have to protest to draw attention, but to demand reform, we've got to vote at the local level. We've got to vote at the state level. States like Georgia that have citizen arrest laws that made the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery think they had the right to go and kill him. It's thinking about all of these things. We have to put people in place who not only share our values, but see our humanity. And that only happens when we vote. Voting changes everything, because if it didn't, people wouldn't be fighting so hard to keep us from doing so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great point. Well, and thank you so much for that. I think there are so many people who just worry and wonder and aren't sure where to start. But I think you're right that voting is a great way for all of us to lend our voices and show who we want to lead us. So thank you so much for giving us all this information, for sharing with us your thoughts and your advice. I know so many people are going to appreciate exactly what you've said today.
Cheslie, thank you so much. And if I can help people, go to fairfight2020.com or .org and faircount.org to learn more about voting rights and about the census. And thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you.
Absolutely. Thank you.